There is a certain kind of person who feels most alive, not when they are seen, applauded, or praised, but when they are quiet, not empty quiet, not lonely quiet, but the kind of silence that feels like oxygen to the nervous system, the kind of silence that slows the heartbeat, softens the breath, and finally allows the mind to rest. If that resonates with you, I want you to hear this clearly from the beginning. This preference for silence is not a flaw. It is not avoidance. It is not emotional weakness. It is a psychological orientation. And very often, it is a sign of deep emotional intelligence. As a psychologist, I've listened to countless people say, often in a low voice, almost apologetically, "I don't like attention," or "I feel drained when people focus on me," or "I just want to be left alone sometimes." And almost always, what follows is guilt, confusion, a quiet fear that something is wrong with them. They compare themselves to louder personalities, to people who thrive on validation, to people who seem energized by being seen. And somewhere inside, they start wondering if they're broken. But psychology tells a very different story. People who prefer silence over attention often possess an unusually strong inner world. Their strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't compete for space. It doesn't need an audience. It lives quietly, internally, steadily. And because it's internal, it's often misunderstood in a world that worships noise. We live in a culture where visibility is treated as success, where being noticed is mistaken for being valuable, where silence is interpreted as absence. But silence is not absence. Silence is where processing happens. It's where emotions are digested instead of suppressed, where identity stabilizes instead of constantly reshaping itself to fit expectations, where meaning is built slowly, honestly, without performance. People who seek silence are often not escaping the world. They are metabolizing it. One of the most important distinctions I want to make is this: preferring silence is not the same as fearing attention. Fear-based avoidance comes from anxiety, shame, or unresolved threat. Preference comes from self-awareness. Many people who choose silence are not afraid of attention at all. They simply don't need it to feel real. Their sense of worth is internally regulated rather than externally dependent. Psychologically, this is a critical difference. From a clinical perspective, individuals who prefer silence often show high intrapersonal intelligence. They are deeply aware of their internal states. They notice subtle emotional shifts, internal conflicts, unresolved thoughts that others might ignore or distract themselves from. And because of this awareness, excessive stimulationists, especially social attention, can feel intrusive rather than affirming. Attention pulls them outward when their nervous system is asking for inward regulation. Silence, for these individuals, is not emptiness. It is alignment. Many people who prefer silence also have highly responsive nervous systems. This doesn't mean fragile. It means finely tuned. Loud environments, constant interaction, emotional performance, all of these demand continuous output. Over time, that level of stimulation becomes exhausting. Silence allows the nervous system to reset. It brings the body back into balance. When someone says, "I need quiet," what they're often saying is, "I need my body to feel safe again." This is not dysfunction. This is regulation. People who crave attention often rely on external feedback to manage their emotions. Calm when they are seen. Anxious when they are ignored. People who prefer silence regulate internally. Calm when there is less input, not more. Neither way is morally superior, but one is deeply misunderstood. Silence also plays a powerful role in identity formation. When attention disappears, performance ends. There is no audience, no role to play, no image to maintain. For many people, this feels terrifying, but for those who prefer silence, it feels liberating. Silence allows them to exist without explaining themselves, without adjusting, without being interpreted. It is where authenticity lives. This is why many quiet people are deeply reflective. They think before they speak. They observe before they engage. They listen, not because they are passive, but because they are processing. Their silence is active, intentional, full. They often notice patterns others miss, emotional undercurrents others overlook, truths that don't need to be spoken to be felt. In therapy, I often hear people say, "I've always been quiet," and people assume I'm shy or insecure. But when we explore further, what emerges is not insecurity, it's depth, a preference for substance over stimulation, meaning over noise, presence over performance. Silence is also where healing begins. When the world goes quiet, unresolved emotions surface, grief, fatigue, old thoughts that were never given space. Many people avoid silence because they fear what will come up. But those who learn to sit with silence develop emotional resilience. They learn that feelings can be tolerated, that discomfort passes, that they do not need constant distraction to survive their inner world. This is emotional maturity. Silence teaches patience. It teaches containment. It teaches self-trust. Over time, it builds a stable sense of self that isn't easily shaken by opinions, trends, or external pressure. There is also a misconception that people who prefer silence are disconnected. In reality, they often feel deeply but selectively. They don't spread their energy thin. They connect in focused, meaningful ways. When they speak, it's intentional. When they give attention, it's genuine. This is why many quiet individuals form fewer relationships, but deeper ones. Their emotional economy is precise. I also want to speak about trauma, not because silence always comes from trauma, but because sometimes it does. For some people, silence becomes a sanctuary after chaos, after being misunderstood, after emotional overwhelm. In these cases, silence is protective. It allows the nervous system to recover. It creates boundaries where there were once none, and protection is not pathology. If silence helped you survive, that does not make you weak. It means your system adapted intelligently. Over time, as safety increases, silence often transforms from protection into preference, from survival into self-knowledge. If you're someone who prefers silence, I want to speak directly to you now. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not antisocial. You are not emotionally unavailable. You are not cold, distant, or detached. You simply process life differently. You require space to think, to feel, to integrate. You do not need to broadcast your existence to validate it. Your quiet is not emptiness, it is density. You carry thoughts that take time to unfold, emotions that move slowly but deeply, insights that require stillness to surface. And in a world addicted to noise, this can make you feel invisible. But invisibility is not insignificance. Psychologically speaking, people who prefer silence often develop a strong internal compass. They know who they are, even when no one is watching. They don't shapeshift for approval. They don't panic in the absence of attention. This inner stability is one of the strongest predictors of long-term emotional health. Silence also fosters creativity. Many original ideas are born in quiet moments, not during performance, but during reflection. When the mind stops reacting, it begins creating. This is why so many thinkers, writers, and innovators describe silence as essential. Not because they dislike people, but because silence allows their mind to breathe. If attention feels exhausting to you, it doesn't mean you are incapable. It means your energy is finite and valuable. You choose where it goes, and that choice reflects self-respect. I want you to imagine silence not as a void, but as a room, a private room inside you, where everything settles, where thoughts line up instead of colliding, where emotions speak one at a time instead of shouting over each other. That room isn't empty, it's organized, and you are allowed to stay there as long as you need. You do not owe the world constant access to you. Healing often begins when we stop forcing ourselves to be louder than we are, when we stop apologizing for our pace, when we stop confusing visibility with value. The goal of psychological health is not to become more noticeable, it is to become more integrated. And if silence helps you do that, silence is not something to overcome, it is something to honor. One day you may notice people coming to you for calm, for perspective, for grounding, not because you demanded attention, but because your presence feels steady, safe, unforced. That is the quiet influence of someone who knows themselves. So, if you prefer silence over attention, understand this: you are not withdrawing from life. You are listening to it more closely. You are allowing it to settle before responding. And that is a form of wisdom many never develop. Stay quiet when you need to. Speak when it matters. Rest when the world gets loud. Trust that your way of being gentle, inward, reflective is not a limitation. It is a strength that does not need to announce itself.